All right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Orange Crush podcast presented by Newton Scott & Associates and Chick-fil-A. We want to thank them for powering us through the 2025 season. We'll have more on them in a bit here. But today, ladies and gentlemen, we have, I would say, a close friend of mine, one of the most talented journalists I know personally, and I'm sure you guys agree with that sentiment. Read his stuff at the State. It's Chapel Fowler. Chapel, man, making your Orange Crush podcast debut. How you doing, brother? Welcome to the show, man.
Thank you, Grayson, for the very kind and generous introduction. It's good to be on with you. I know we've talked a lot of Drake May and Panthers informally in the press room over the last few weeks, and a lot of Clemson stuff. So good to get on here and hear you nail your ad read, and now we're ready to go. So I'm happy to be here. I appreciate the invite.
You started us off right with talking about Drake May, so you've earned yourself an invite back. I just want to say that. That's the requirement. I don't know if you got that email. The second one, it was you got to talk good about Drake, but we'll get to that later, I guess. But we're really here today. It's fascinating. I'm sure a lot of other folks have reached out to you. For those who don't know, and before we even get to the Clemson UNC of it all, I'd love for you to be able to just kind of tell the audience where you work for, who you work for. Just give us sort of the shtick on who is Chapel Fowler on the Clemson beat.
Yeah, so I work for the State newspaper, which is the McClatchy statewide newspaper in South Carolina. My paper's based out of Columbia. We mostly cover Gamecock stuff, but I live up here in Greenville, and I'm our one Clemson guy, so I'm kind of all Clemson sports beat writer. You know, a lot of that focus is on football, but I do a good bit of travel and work for things like basketball and baseball and dive into other stuff, athletic department wide and statewide sometimes. But Clemson football is the main gig. So I'm traveling to every game just like you all are. I'm kind of on that primary beat with people like TigerNet and you and David, et cetera. And I've been doing it for I've been employed about 3 years at the State, and this is the fourth football season I've covered, which is crazy to say, but I guess I'm like a semi old head at this point.
Oh.
I've got a few gray hairs to prove it, so I'm getting up there in years.
Do we start calling guys like you, David, and them Unc or something on the beat? Is that how we should address you?
Oh, yeah. I don't think I deserve that title just yet, but I mean, if you compare, how long has this person been doing it versus this person, I probably can't fight back too much against that sort of nickname. So if it happens, it's all good. My sister calls me Unc. She's 18, so we.
Oh no!
I get those jokes already from my own family for being too old.
So I think I'm not probably the first person to reach out to you for this, particularly because of your North Carolina Chapel Hill ties. But it is fascinating. This is a game that I think Clemson fans and probably football fans for sure have had circled on the calendar since Bill Belichick took the job in December of 2024. Even it was such big news that Dabo Swinney was being asked about it at his ACC championship press conference instead of the SMU preview. Is you hearing this Bill Belichick rumor, Dabo? And he kind of laughed it off at the time as that's kind of crazy to think about. But here we are talking about here in a few days, we'll see that matchup finally come to fruition. But I'd love to kind of start where it began with the rumors and obviously your ties to North Carolina, the chatter up there once this officially started and how it sort of progressed. There's a lot of outside noise. Certainly the distractions that have come with the Belichick tenure felt like it was taking ages to get to the football field. And then once the product on the field started, we'll get into that obviously, but would love to just get your sort of immediate reaction to when it first started and how things have sort of progressed on that side of things, just with the ties that you have.
Yeah. So for anybody in the audience who doesn't know, I'm a UNC Chapel Hill graduate. I'm a 2020 COVID grad. I went on spring break and technically never came back to class. So I guess I'm still on spring break in that way. But yeah, I have a lot of friends who went there or are still up there living in the area. Obviously, I covered them a ton as a student journalist and did a little bit in jobs before this one. So a lot of Belichick chatter in my day-to-day life, just given like where I've been and where I went to school. I was stunned when it first happened. I was stunned. I was excited like you. I mean, the first thing I did was double check Clemson's ACC schedule for the next however many years that got released. I think it was at some point in the previous year, they had kind of set up under the scheduling model that's now been thrown out the window, like all these models are. here's who Clemson's going to play in 2025. And I thought UNC was on that schedule, and I looked and I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, this is going to happen. If this goes through, this is going to be a pretty cool game. And like you and everybody else, I obviously expected a little bit better than two teams that are a combined 0-5 against power conference opponents entering this one in a noon kickoff and a 10 a.m. ludicrous concert. The fact that this game isn't in prime time is just crazy. I don't think anybody in the offseason would have told you that. Like, how could a coaching matchup this big with two just like luminaries of their respective sports and two interesting programs that kind of had, UNC had a good schedule. Clemson, obviously, with all the talent coming back, it seemed like a game that was going to be a 4-0 or 3-1 versus 3-1, or maybe UNC's 2-2, but they look a little bit more competitive. And now we have, again, like I mentioned, two teams scrapping for their first P4 win, a game that has randomly become really important for Clemson's bowl chances, which is crazy to say 4 games into this season, but that's kind of where we are. So different vibes, but I think, the madness is going to make it even more fun. So I'm expecting some shenanigans of some sort on Saturday. I don't know from which side, but it'll be a good one up in the college alma mater's football stadium.
Yeah, I think the way you described it is it's wild that we have Ludacris performing at 9:45 in the morning. I don't even know who's going to show up. I know Ludacris is a pretty popular guy, but you're asking a lot of folks to get up really early for that and get jammed, get pumped up. But I think before we get into the Clemson UNC thing, the way you described us talking about this being a game that Clemson has to win to make a bowl, and that's sort of where the season's at. Let's start with what's gone wrong with Clemson. And it's a 1-3 start. I think a lot of us, and I think you and I had a talk walking back from Jervy, is how good will this team really be? And I think the consensus we've come to was, yeah, I think you and I both expected this group to be at least a playoff contender and the season not to be over on October 2nd in terms of that destination. So in your evaluation, you've done great work, by the way, just dissecting what has happened with this football team. But in your eyes, what's going on? What is the reason? Or there's not one root cause, but it's certainly fascinating to dive into and get those different perspectives.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I don't know where to start. I think every coach talks about complementary football and how important that is. So that's not a especially unique concept or like criticism of a team that's not playing well, but I just don't think Clemson has. And probably the more concerning part about that isn't it? It's not that they've had, slips every now and then. It's that every single game, it feels like that there's just not a consistent product from all three units being put out there. And given, how well regarded and well compensated both this coaching staff and the roster in the rev share era are now, like this is a expensive roster with a lot of really good players on it, and guys are going to be playing on Sundays next year. This is a expensive coaching staff with a lot of great names, well-regarded hires. Obviously, Dabo Swinney, one of the best coaches in the college football, I guess, 21st century. You want to give him top 15, 20 all time. I don't think anybody would argue with that. All of that, you're in a conference that's considered, your conference to win. All this stuff going in your direction, all this preseason love, so much talent coming back. They essentially didn't lose a single guy with remaining eligibility that they wanted to keep. I guess maybe besides AJ Hoffler, like one guy. So all that's in front of you. And again, I think a few guys have said this in the last few weeks, we are what we put on tape. And I think that's been a pretty astute observations. Like Clemson on tape is a 1-3 football team that cannot consistently get offense and defense playing together as one, has had game management errors, has had a lack of hustle at times, a lack of, toughness at times, that some kind of baffling mistakes from a lot of veteran guys, K. Klubnik included. So they are kind of, they're 1-3. That's what they are.
Yeah, Wade Wood has told us before Georgia, it was after Georgia Tech, just the aftermath. We are who we put on tape. And when you go back and watch it, it's, as you said, there's a lot of issues. We could have a whole podcast episode to bring you on of just what's gone wrong with Clemson football this year. And the way that this matchup has sort of been circled was, man, I can't wait for this to be under the bright lights. Even for TCU, North Carolina, they wanted to get Bill Belichick's first college game. So the natural conclusion, or the one to draw, is, okay, when Dabo Swinney comes to town, This has got to be, at the very least, a 3:30 kick. You're going to hear Sean McDonough's voice on the ESPN broadcast. They're going to be talking about Clemson's push against one of the greats in football in general, in Belichick, and it hasn't panned out like that. North Carolina has a deceivingly easy first scripted drive against TCU, and I think that's been the peak of the Bill Belichick era at North Carolina, as Josh Hoover comes right back, and they never looked back on the Tar Heel defense. When I think of this matchup, and I'd love to sort of get your thoughts on how I'd characterize it, I'd argue this matters a little bit more. And I know that it's weird to say that without playoff implications. Obviously, North Carolina could technically still, because they're not in any sort of whole conference-wise, so they could find a way to magically pull a run. But I don't think that's happening. You and I both probably don't believe that. But I'd argue for Clemson, in this kind of season, you're sort of looking, and Sweeney's been talking about kind of getting back on course, mentally being on that right spot. For me, it's, if not now, when is this talent going to emerge against a team in North Carolina that I'd argue is worse than Troy on paper in terms of the bottom of the barrel talent that Belichick had to spring for in the portal? It's one of those moments that if fans thought it was bad after the Syracuse loss, I can't imagine the discourse after falling to a Belichick team that's looked pretty putrid to the first month of the season. And so we talk about bowl stakes, but I think in terms of that get-right game that Clemson has to have, I feel like Saturday is remarkably important. Even if it's 1-3 versus 2-2, they got to get this. There's something to that urgency, not just for this season, but program-wide. I feel like they need something, and this is the perfect opportunity. They're not playing Alabama this Saturday. They're playing a team that they can beat.
Before we get back to this video, we'd like to thank the title sponsor for this podcast, Newton, Scott and Associates. This team is headlined by Jeff Scott, former Clemson assistant coach and two-time national champion, as well as Eric Newton, a longtime local and trusted real estate partner. These two are teaming up to provide a first-class experience for all Clemson fans. Whether you're looking to buy, sell, or build in the upstate area of South Carolina, you can trust Newton, Scott and Associates. Choose the same team that Clemson coaches are selecting when they're looking to buy, sell, or build, all the way from Tigertown to Lake Kiowee. For more information, you can find them at newtonscottsc.com or by calling the number 864-722-9062. That's 864-722-9062. Now, let's get back to the video.
I'm with you. They need a get-right game so bad right now, more than, gosh, I can't think of the last time they needed one like this. I guess maybe you could go back to the Notre Dame game in 2023, post Tyler from Spartanburg Grant. You're 4-4 in an equally, I guess, dire bowl situation, and they took care of business there. But yeah, I think you said that well. The idea of like, if not now, when? We've heard a few weeks in a row now about how guys are embracing their backs against the wall, and we want to play with desperation. And Dabo imploring his team to play that way, and we just haven't seen it. And here's a 2-week break that they've talked about. We've reset our season. We've reset our goals, which, again, crazy that 4 weeks into a season, that's what the outcome is for them. But it's what they've done. So I don't know. There's still decent opportunity ahead for this team. We've heard guys say the right things and talk about, we want to send the seniors out in the right way. We want to show some of these young guys that are the next generation of Clemson football, like what it means to get knocked down and get back up. And Dabo, he's pointed the finger at players in the last few weeks. And then Tuesday we heard more of, hey, this has been a total coaching failure. I think there's probably some level of trying to build back up confidence for some of these guys that have, not played well, or maybe have played well and the team just hasn't had the results that they've wanted. Like, I understand that it's hard to block out all the negativity. And like when you're running 3, there's going to be negativity and deserved negativity. So it's probably hard to totally just breeze right past that. But this is their chance. Like you said, that this is a beatable team. It's not an incredibly talented or impressive team on paper. Road games, so a little bit of a crowd atmosphere environment question, I guess. But yeah, this is one that if you're Clemson, you should feel good about winning. And I don't know, execution, all that stuff. This feels like one where it's almost like a non-negotiable, because you've dug yourself into a hole that could get like really, really ugly if this continues. So, put the flag in the sand now and at least get going in the right direction, I think has to be the goal on Saturday.
I hate to be hypothetical on a podcast where we're sort of previewing a game on Saturday, but I'd love to sort of chart out, because I've thought about this for the last few weeks, is what happens if Clemson loses on Saturday to North Carolina? Because I do believe that's a real possibility, just given what the data that we've been shown in 2025 and what this team has put on the field is not a very good one. And so I could see a Belichick-led team. They've had a bye week themselves. Maybe there's something that they can pull from Max Johnson. If he plays on Saturday, does that offense look better than with Gio Lopez? There's so many different unknowns, and I'm not one to give Clemson the benefit of the doubt as of right now. I haven't seen it yet. And so it's tough to chart it out because there's so many unknowns, but in your estimation, have you thought about what happens next if Clemson is to fall to a North Carolina team that you'd argue certainly would be the worst loss of the season? Someone had mentioned, I think I read it on Twitter or somewhere, that talent-wise, you're not going to see a team this bad probably till Furman. And that's pretty damning on North Carolina and the roster acquisition that they've made. But it feels like there would be a point of no return almost, where if Clemson were to win this game, you could say, okay, there's that spark. They could bring it back. It's not a good football team, but it's something. And you can ride that into Boston College, and then you can try to see if you can pick up quality wins over to SMU, Florida State, and see if you could pick up a semblance of a season. But 1-4 is a pretty dark place to be in. 1-3, you can maybe scrap it out and find a way to win 9 or even 8 and say, hey, there's some momentum for 26. 1-4 feels like a spot that I'd be sitting there on that team, and it's where do you go from there? What buttons can you press after that?
Yeah, I think dark would be the word. Gosh, I don't know. That Clemson at 1-4, 0-3 ACC. I mean, uncharted territory in the Dabo era in a lot of ways. I don't know if that happens. I think you're just getting closer and closer to. We've heard a lot in the last few weeks about, doing things, sticking to our process. But there's kind of been caveats. Like when Dabo's talked about Cade as our starter, he said Cade is our starter right now. When I asked him about possibility of midseason staff changes, he said, not absolutely no way. There's no way I'm going to consider that. He said, I don't anticipate that. He's kind of given like milquetoast endorsements of Garrett Riley as offensive coordinator. On Tuesday, really came after the whole coaching staff, and that includes himself. It's not just him arguing about his assistants, like it's him saying it's on him as well. But I think another loss just gets you closer and closer to, some level of tangible change after the season, and probably feeling like there maybe is something that you need to do midseason, because, after that point, if you get to 1-4, you still have 7 games left or something, 8 games left. You got to play those too, and you got to keep your guys motivated, and you've got to keep some semblance of momentum and fan support and all this stuff. And I mean, it's hard to sit at 1-4, 0-3 ACC if that were to happen and say, hey, our process is working, and not feel like you have to change anything. What that change could be, I don't know. Maybe it's a quarterback change, maybe it's a staff change. All this again is total hypothetical. What we've heard from them is that they trust what they're doing, and they've been frustratingly close over and over and over, and they think that's going to break through, and maybe it will. But I don't think you can sit at 1-4 and not feel like you have to shake something up in some way, shape, or form if you're Dabo Swinney, to just finish this season and keep scrapping for momentum, which they have not been able to find really at any point this year. That they haven't had a normal game yet, which is weird for Clemson.
Yeah, they talk about being uncommon. It's been a lot of uncommon games. We can flip this and just quickly on the hypothetical train. Do you see a reality where this is sort of like App State, where they were taking a lot of offensive frustrations out on that Mountaineers team, and it was sort of that sigh of relief on the sideline of, okay, this is, there's something here that they can work with? Do you see a world where Clemson lights it on fire in Chapel Hill, obviously with the caveat that in the back of our minds, Clemson looks good, but it's against who, really? It's against a North Carolina team that on the other side isn't very good. So is there a world where you could see potentially you're writing your stuff on Saturday afternoon and it's okay, that looked normal. That looked what Clemson should look like?
Yeah, I thought Troy was going to be that, honestly, because it was almost the same setup. Like, you lose to an SEC opponent in week 1. Obviously, Georgia was more of a blowout than LSU was. But that next game against a G5 is kind of like a perfect get-right opportunity. And instead, you're down 16-0 in the second quarter, 16-3 at halftime, and you're getting booed off your home field in game 2. I think the UNC game gives them a good chance to get that done, even if it's a little bit delayed and 3 games later. I think UNC's defense has been okay this year. Some of their rankings compared to the offense, like they're a lot better defensively, something like I want to say top 50, 60, 70, and things like scoring defense, yards allowed per game, that type of thing. Probably their best, most talented guys are on defense, like those linebackers and corners. Some of the guys that Steve Belichick brought from Washington are solid additions, but I don't think you measure up that unit with Clemson offense and don't think that this is a game where Clemson can get stuff done. They've been sitting around for 2 weeks hearing how bad they've been. And theoretically, a road game like this, you really get to stick it to the opposing crowd and really dominate. It feels like a good opportunity to do that. I think when I was on with Faxon earlier this week, he mentioned like Cade at Virginia Tech, at Pittsburgh, road environments. Like he's played pretty well on the road in general. Those were 2 games last year that he really like put his stamp on the season. He had a super signature play in both those games, stumbling, stay on his feet, complete the touchdown against Tech, and obviously the long touchdown go-ahead run against Pittsburgh, those sort of things. It's a really good opportunity for that. Like everything is set up for that. They're really healthy, I think, and then we'll get the injury report tonight, but they got back basically all the starters they were missing against Syracuse, and Dabo has said they're about as like fully available as they can be. That's pending whatever happened in practice the last 2 days. I don't know. But everything's on the table for this offense to kind of bounce back. And again, they're not playing like the 85 Bears on defense or anything. And they had 500 whatever yards last week. So it's a good opportunity to put points on the board and actually score some touchdowns with all those yards. And I'm sure they're going to be trying to do that, but I'm skeptical until I see it.
You mentioned road performances. I felt like Klubnik, I know people point to Syracuse being his best game. I thought he was making some pretty big throws in that second half. It's just that Clemson didn't have the ball last with Haynes King, and he ended up taking them down the field for that fire drill victory. But some of those drives that Klubnik had to find a way to get them back, and obviously Randall played a big part in that. But I think I had mentioned it. He's making some big throws here. He's reading the field well, just didn't have the ball last. So we'll see if that ends up being the case. Before we get to like the prediction of it all, and I don't want to spoil anything maybe you have on your front, but I'd love to hear what you'd think, and maybe it doesn't mean as much now because of where Clemson's at, but I'd love to flip it. Let's say we've talked about what this means if Clemson loses. What does it mean for Bill Belichick and your North Carolina guys? Now Clemson isn't as good as they used to be, but the talent is still there. Clemson's status as a brand, while it hasn't looked as great, I do still think there's value in beating a team like Clemson, and you have that sort of, there's some progress here. We beat a really talented football team. They just haven't been able to figure it out on paper. Is there something there for Belichick if they find a way to win? Are people going to be impressed up at UNC? Or is it one of those, they beat a mess at Clemson, this is probably the year to do it?
Yeah, I think it would be Belichick's signature win of his UNC tenure. And again, that's not a grand thought or anything. They've played 4 games so far and beaten 2 non-power conference teams. But I think fans would be excited. Like, I think UNC winning against Clemson would probably be a sign that that's why you add Belichick as your coach. This isn't the most talented roster in the ACC by any means, but if you can beat a team that's, won 8 of the last 10 titles and has a lot of talent on the roster, even if the record doesn't exactly show it, that's kind of like validation of why you spent all that money on Belichick and that staff and allowed him to kind of build a program the way he wants to. And that I think would juice up fans. You mentioned like UNC's 0-0 in the ACC. Like they haven't put a great product on paper, but you win this one, you're 1-0 with a win against a really talented ACC team. And then you've got those last 7 games ahead of you, and who knows what's going to happen. And I know UNC's schedule was considered to be pretty manageable in the offseason. I haven't really looked to see who's on their ACC schedule and how those teams have done this year. If anybody's like outperformed their preseason expectation, if there's any like sneaky tough games waiting. But like that there's some open opportunity for them. And if you start 1-0, you win at home, you come off your own bye week. This is a UNC team coming off a bye week just like Clemson. So they've equally had 2 weeks of game prep and everything. And obviously one of the best NFL coaches of all time leading them. This is one where I think they could really – this could be like a signature Belichick win if UNC finds a way to pull this one off.
Yeah, and I have it pulled up, the teams that they have on their schedule. Outside Virginia, if you talk about teams that have probably outperformed their preseason expectation, you get Virginia at home. You have to travel to Cal. in 2 weeks. So they have a weird schedule in terms of their buys. They've got like 2 buys sandwiched back to back almost. They've got Clemson and then another open date, which I've never seen before. Have you? Where you have 1 game and 2 buys?
Weird.
That's a 3-week. That's a really odd stretch, and might be pretty detrimental to the rhythm if they were to pull off the win. But you get a Syracuse team without Steve Angeli. You play Stanford, a Duke team that's kind of underwhelmed, and then a North Carolina State team to close out the season. Maybe fans start they talk about the hopium instead of the copium. Maybe if there's something there, that's for another time. But Chapel, before we let you go, let's talk about the game. What do you think happens on Saturday? It feels like this is sort of, as we've mentioned in this show, this is sort of that fork in the road where Clemson either is heading down the doomsday scenario where someone's breaking glass because the emergencies happened, or there's that week where they can just kind of take a breath and focus on they've won a game, they've won a P4 game, they've played complimentary football. I think Clemson fans would it's not going to cure the sins of the first 4 weeks, but a win is a win at the end of the day. And if you can get that, you can at least feel good about where things are headed. And maybe that says something about Sweeney's program where they're 1-3, but they're still out there fighting and playing for their coach. There's a lot of headlines that can still be created, even if the records don't exactly reflect enthusiasm. What happens on Saturday?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've seen so much to kind of doubt this team. And I don't think a win on Saturday puts them on track to where they're just going to rip off all these consecutive wins and finish 9-3 or anything. But I think Clemson will win. I think it could be something like I think the Troy score was 27-16 Clemson maybe or something like that. I'll take like I don't know, 27-13 Clemson. Let's say it's close for a while. Maybe not the best first half, and then there's a splash play or a turnover in the second half, third quarter that really gets it going in their direction. I think they can come out of this one feeling okay, like they've answered some of the questions or kind of gotten somewhat back on the right track. I'm sure it won't be like a super clean performance. If they win in blowout fashion, I'd be really surprised. I think that would obviously, put a lot of wind in their sails. But I don't know. I mean, Dabo, to be fair, like has had his back against the wall in a lot of moments, and a lot of his teams have responded really well from bad starts. Obviously 1-3 is his worst ever start, so we don't know how a team's going to respond from that. But he cited a lot of examples that are fair. I mean, I think back to 2023, I don't think anybody walked into Memorial Stadium that morning thinking Clemson was going to beat Notre Dame at home and rip off those 4 straight wins, finish 8-4, get to the bowl game, all that stuff, and beat Kentucky and kind of salvage that season. So I think this roster is more talented than that one in 2023 by a good bit. So I think they'll, get it done on the road. It won't be perfect or flawless by any means, but it'll give people a little bit of hope and at least make the rest of the season more interesting. So that's my half-baked prediction on Saturday. What about you?
I like Clemson here. I really do. I think that this is sort of that last spot, I think, in my mind, where if it's going to happen, it's got to be Saturday. I think BC's always been a tough road trip for this team, regardless of the talent. Even that 2018 team struggled a little bit in Chestnut Hill, even for a little bit. Boston College always seems to play their best up there. That's a funky road game, sort of like what Virginia was Friday night. It's just a place it's undervalued, but I'm rambling. I like Clemson 34-17. I think the offense, this is that spot. The defense in North Carolina, I've watched UCF and TCU multiple times now, and I'm seeing guys run into each other. I'm seeing cornerbacks get picked on. It's been a mess. I don't know how long the Belichick experiment lasts in North Carolina. I think that's another question entirely that maybe I'm not equipped to answer because I don't have all the information. But man, this has got to be the spot for Clemson here, and this might be that last time where if they drop this one, I'm not picking them again. I'm putting my hands in the air and I'm going to say, look, that was my last straw. From purely an objective standpoint, this has got to be the spot, and I think they're going to get it done. My final question to you, Chapel, is it's one of those things that people have asked me the whole time, even since July, is did you ever think you would, in a college football setting, cover a game with Bill Belichick in it? It was weird in July for AC kickoff. It's going to be really funky on Saturday. I'm excited from a pure football standpoint. Obviously, people have seen the Boston memorabilia. There's no hiding it. It's a guy that I've grown up my entire life watching, and now he's going to be on the other sideline. And so it's cool. It's a cool thing. Never thought if I was going to cover a Belichick team, figured it'd be up in Foxborough and Gillette, but not in college in the South for sure.
Yeah, it's a bucket list one. I mean, it's one that I'll be able to joke about, and you and anybody else can be able to joke about or look back on however many years later and be like, yeah, remember whenever Bill Belichick decided to coach at UNC after he did all that stuff with the Patriots? It'll be like a fun little historical anomaly that we can attach our names to in a very small, unimportant, I was in the press box fashion. But yeah, it's cool. I mean, the historic nature of it all, and, first multi-time Super Bowl champ against multi-time college champ at a college level since Paterno and Walsh in like the 1993 Blockbuster Bowl, to tell you how long ago that was. Neither of us were born, and Blockbuster has been extinct for however long. So yeah, it's going to be fun. Again, I'm sure something weird will happen, like noon game, Chapel Hill, two struggling teams. There's going to be something silly, and I'll be up there ready to tackle it, whatever it is.
Yeah, we're excited. We'll be up there. Chapel, before we let you go, giving you this opportunity to plug your stuff. Where can the fans find you, whether that's social media or your work at the state?
Yeah, my Twitter account is at Chapel Fowler, just first name, last name, really easy. And our website is thestate.com/sports. You can find all my Clemson stuff there, and Gamecocks, high school, other stuff like that statewide. So I appreciate you giving me that opportunity and having me on. Y'all do a great job, and happy to be a first-time Orange Crush guest now. I feel like I've made it.
Let's go. I don't think this is the marker for if you've made it, Chapel. I think getting your there are some other examples of Chapel Fowler greatness we could pull from. It's definitely not this podcast, but we do appreciate it. Guys, thank you as always for tuning in. Subscribe for more. I want to thank our sponsors as well for powering us through a really funky 2025 season. Can't wait to get up to Chapel Hill. God bless y'all. Have a good one.